All right. Well, hello and welcome, everybody. My name is Alina George. I am a project specialist with the Federal Aviation Administration's UAS Integration Office. I work primarily in outreach and engagement. And if you were here last night, you know what we're doing. And if you weren't, we are here today as part of Drone Safety Awareness Week, which is an annual week-long outreach campaign led by the FAA that aims to help talk to people and the public about drone safety. Droning on After Dark is a different side of Drone Safety Awareness Week. And so it takes place from 9 to 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, which allows participation from recreational flyers and hobbyists. So each of the evening events, we've got a different group of panelists, and tonight we've got another wonderful panel for you all. So I'm really excited to welcome this panel. We've got Ryan Lessard, Mako Reactra. We've got Susan Smith, who also goes by RooFPV, Evan Turner, Headsup, and Chris Thomas, who is the CEO of MultiGP. So I'm going to kick things off with the panelists. Please introduce yourselves. And why don't we start with Ryan?
Hi, thanks for having me on. Mako Reactra, and I've been flying FPV since 2018. I primarily race drones, but I also like cinematic FPV as well as tiny whoops. And Susan and I are actually on a drone racing team together for a Drone Champions League called Quad Force One.
Let's pass it off to Susie.
Yep, so I'm on Quad Force One with Ryan. It's been really awesome seeing her progress over the 2 years. I think I met her right after she had started very first flying at the International Open. I'm also a Velocidrone team pilot, and I'm the first woman so far to qualify for the MultiGP World Cup and the first woman to do the Mayhem 12-hour endurance drone race, which is amazing. But I think one of the achievements I'm most proud of fairly recently is I placed 10th out of 290 total pilots in the international game of Whoop last season. I'm competing again this season, and we'll see how far I can go.
That's awesome. Thank you so much, Susie. Evan, I'm going to pick on you next.
How's it going? My name's Evan Turner. I am I would say, grassroots drone racing pilot and aviation enthusiast ever since I was a kid. I'm currently 18. Ever since I was 6 years old, I've been into flying anything. My grandfather has a full-scale airplane that I've flown in. And ever since I was 6, I've been competing and flying remote control things. I started flying drones approximately 6 years ago. And Chris Thomas actually was at my very first drone race. And since then, drone racing has become far more than a passion. It has become like a career and a job for me. And it's been one of the best things that's ever happened to me in life is drones. And they have, as far as an education standpoint, also taken me and teaching me so many different things, taking me around the world. Drones have truly changed my life for the better and given me so many opportunities I wouldn't have had elsewhere and exposed me to so many other things, whether that's engineering, competition, handling pressure, running a business. It really has done so much for me. And I want to do anything I can to give back and hope drones and drone racing, etc., can change other people's lives for the better as well.
Thank you so much, Evan. So we're going to dig into all of this in a little bit. Chris, you are the last one. So please tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. I'm Chris Thomas. I'm the founder of MultiGP. It is a drone racing league that pretty much tries to encourage everyone to get into drone racing. I know the panelists here, I've seen them at different events, and I've spent the last 6 years of my life, for some crazy reason, just spending way too much time, energy, and money to make drone racing more of a reality.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. And thank you all for being here. So for those of you who are watching at home or elsewhere, we're going to have a conversation. I've got a couple of questions that I have queued up. for all of our panelists today, but we're really just gonna wander down the path and see where it leads us. And we also have folks who are looking at the YouTube chat. So if you've got questions about FPV racing, put it in the chat. It'll get to us and we'll ask them on here. And we are also taking notes. This is a lot of this today, and all of the droning on after darks that we're doing is so that we at the FAA can learn about what this hobby is, what you all love about it. So I'm really excited to get into FPV racing. So let's start with a really, really basic question, because I have done some research, but what is FPV racing? Any one of you, please go ahead.
I'll jump in. So FPV racing, what really makes FPV racing magical is it is an opportunity to put your consciousness remotely into a drone and race in such a way where you would never do that if you were actually in the aircraft. So for example, I'm a full-scale pilot. I love everything that has to do with flying. I would never in a million years fly as aggressively as I would with FPV. You see, when you put on a pair of goggles, your video connects from your goggles to the drone, and you're able to fly it as if you were in the cockpit, but without putting yourself into harm. It can be a bit disorienting when you first start, because when you turn left, you expect to feel your body turn left and you don't. But once you overcome that, there's this moment where, at least to me, it feels like you become that machine. You suddenly are the drone, and it's unbelievable. It's like cheating the system for an adrenaline rush, because usually an adrenaline rush requires that you put yourself at risk. You know, you jump out of an airplane, guaranteed adrenaline rush. However,
that was cool.
You're jumping out of an airplane to do that. So it's magical.
Brian, I see you nodding your head.
Yeah, well, it's funny he said an adrenaline rush, because my husband used to ride motorcycles, and I used to ride a scooter, so no comparison really, but we sold our bikes. And he says he gets just as much of a rush from flying a drone as he did riding a motorcycle, and drones are just so much more safer.
That's really cool.
It's also as close as you can get to being in a Star Wars speeder without actually being in a Star Wars speeder.
You can't see my office right now, but it is covered in Star Wars. Star Wars is like my thing.
You need to get into FPV though.
Oh, you would love it.
Talking with Lexi and Greg and Drew yesterday, so they were my panelists yesterday, they really got into me and were like, you really need to try this. So I think I'm gonna have to. How do you even get started in racing and FPV?
I think the best way to get started is with one of the computer simulators. So FPV equipment, there is a cost to it and there's a learning curve. So you don't want to be taking your maybe several $100 drone and just learning with that, because you could lose it, you could break it. You're not the most efficiently skilled pilot yet. But if you put a couple weeks on the simulator, you're going to be able to pick up a drone and just go out and you'll know how to fly it. That'd be my advice.
All right, I can do that. And Evan, you're 18. How did you even start this?
Yeah, it's a very interesting question, and it kind of came from what I did as a kid. So something my dad and I did together at the age of, like I said, 6 years old. He got me a remote controlled airplane. You know, as a father, you want to be able to do things with your kids, share passions with your kids. And he got me a remote controlled airplane for Christmas. He had no aviation background or anything, and we started flying together, and it was really fun. And then I slowly started getting better. He got really upset. This is a secret story. He got really upset because he's a doctor and he goes and works, and that's great. He loves his job. He's very good at it. But I was in second or third grade. I came home and I would get on the simulator just like Susie said, and I would practice on there 24/7. It was like my version of a video game. And it's one of the things that I find so beautiful about FPV is like, you know, there's so many parents that are like, oh, my kids just play video games. It's all they want to do. They don't go outside. This is the perfect way to trick those kids that love video games so much into getting outside. And not only getting outside and doing things outside and going to pick up their drone or whatever it is, traveling to cool locations to film cool things, but they have to learn how to build the drone. They have to learn the computer software for the drone. They have to learn when it's broken. They have to learn how to fix it. They have to learn those steps of, oh, this is broken. Okay, let's try this. If this is broken, okay, let's try this. And I think that is beautiful. It's such a, like I said, cool way to trick people into flying or into getting out of the house, into learning all these things in engineering, learning more about school, or getting more invested into it, finding a passion for something like that. And that's really what happened to me. Is I got into racing, and I'm a ridiculously competitive person. It's a little bad. But that competitive spirit made me try harder. It made me want to find the best setup. It made me want to find the best way. It made me want to practice more. It made me want to like refine the technology behind FPV. And yeah, I mean, I'm the perfect example of how FPV can totally be more than just someone that being their video game. It is totally more than that. And I think it can be that for so many more people.
And I have to say that Evan is being extremely humble. He is arguably one of the best FPV pilots currently, not to say that it's going to stay that way, right? Because there's an age thing that happens in drone racing. But right now, he is one of the best pilots there is in the world.
Do you mean people age out?
There's a reaction skill that comes as you get older, you lose your quick reaction ability. And so we're finding that the 12, 13-year-old age range, they just have an unnatural reaction speed to flying these courses. And the drones now travel, I mean, the G-forces that they're under, it's unbelievable how quick the reaction time is needed for you to navigate some of these courses. But I wanted to touch on a point that Evan brought up, was about getting out of the house from playing with video games. But before I do that, I saw a couple questions. Jack in the chat asked what simulator to use. The most common drone racing simulator is Velocidrone. You can find it online. There are other simulators that are out there. I love Velocidrone because it has got the biggest community.
Where would you find that? And how much does it cost?
Velocidrone, I think, is $30 for a license. It's a lifetime.
Okay.
It's not one of those things where you get stuck with a subscription. And you can just Google Velocidrone. You'll find it. It's right there. The point, though, that Evan was talking about getting out of the house, as a race organizer, not only do I talk to a lot of pilots, I talk to a lot of their parents. And one thing that's really exciting, especially with young people, is there's a level of intensity that you get when you're playing a video game, where you're fully involved in that video game. And this is a great alternative to that, but it's in the real world. And, I joke around with parents all the time that you have to put on pants to race drones. But it gets it gets them out of their bedrooms. It's something where you actually go out, you socialize, you learn, and you learn through a very unconventional method. It's not just opening a textbook. It is, something is broken. I don't know what's wrong. I will have to figure this out. And they learn those problem solving steps. And it has, huge benefit throughout life to gain those skills. And I've seen it. I've known Evan since he was a 13-year-old kid, and he was already very talented at flying. But I've seen all the ways that he's grown as a result of flying. So it's got a lot of great implications there as well.
I love that. Excuse me. And I know, Chris, you were talking earlier when we were in our green room, that you are a dad. So do you fly with your daughters? With your kids?
So I have a 9-year-old and a 7-year-old who are at that flying age. The 1-year-old who loves airplanes, we've got a ways to go. And well, I can't say much, but I can tell you that my birthday is coming up soon, and I've been very serious about asking for a certain radio-controlled airplane that's a good trainer plane that I think they might give me. And I think I might already have a nice little buddy box set up for them. But awesome. They actually, because I spend a lot more time organizing and coordinating events, my oldest daughter is more interested in that than flying right now. She has her own like division she's working on just for kids.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
So Ryan and Susie, when did you all start flying? So we know Evan started when he was very small. And it seems like this is kind of a lifetime sort of thing, right? Like it takes time to build the skills to actually race. How did you start?
I think I started slightly before Ryan, and I started probably around, I want to say, Christmas of 2016. So my partner was getting into drones and he kept telling me that I would love it, but I just couldn't get the hang of it. And finally, for Christmas, he got me a Tiny Whoop, which is a drone that would fit in the palm of your hand. It's incredibly small. And because it's fully ducted, it's so tiny, it runs on an itty bitty battery. You can fly it around your house and you don't have to worry about damaging anything. Like you can crash it down the stairs. The thing's really durable. And that's when I finally started to learn, but I didn't get really serious about drone racing. It was just kind of a fun hobby until about a year and a half ago. And then the competitive side of me just lit up and I put a lot more time into practicing. And that's when I became much more involved in drone racing. So it was sort of, for me, it took a long time to get really into it. But now that I'm into it, I'm just obsessed. I don't know, Ryan, was your experience a little bit similar?
Yeah, I started in 2018, so a few years back. And I started with my husband as well. He was always into RC, helicopters, cars, but I never really got into those. But we were watching YouTube and we saw FPV and how you can wear the goggles and be fully immersed, and that sold me. So we bought each other Tiny Whoops, like so very similar to Susan, flying these little guys indoors and kind of learning the basic controls. So I didn't even know about sims. I just was flying Tiny Whoops. And then we found a hobby shop and started racing at the hobby shop. And we had LED courses, you know, that just had tons of LED gates. And we started organizing races. So we, you know, MultiGP has a lot of chapters. So we were involved with a chapter. They're worldwide. So we have a chapter in Maine and we started running weekly races. And then I began flying outdoors after that.
That's amazing.
But I would say aviation's really kind of been in my blood because I'm an Air Force brat. My dad was a mechanic for the SR-71. So we have that definitely in our blood, but he's no longer with us. And unfortunately, he never saw me fly a drone. But I think he knows somehow and is proud of me.
I'm sorry that he's no longer with us. But it sounds like he did some amazing stuff. That's really cool. And I imagine if he's like involved or was involved in flying, surely he knows at this point.
Inherited it a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. I kind of want to talk about something that you mentioned. And this is something that I think comes up quite a bit when the FAA in general is talking about drones, and that's community. So talk to me about the community around drones. Have you all found, like, do you find that most of your friends are also drone pilots? Do you like, when we were doing green room for all of this, by the way, those of you who are watching, turns out everybody knows each other. So that's really neat. And you know, I wonder, right? Like, because I don't know, how big is the community? And what's it like?
Well, from a big perspective, MultiGP really focuses on growing local chapters. That's kind of how we got started. You see, we did our own drone races around here where I live locally, and it went really well. And so I just decided, for some reason, in retrospect, I'm not exactly sure why, that I was going to help other people do that where they lived. And then I did, and we started encouraging people to set up chapters. So now there are, in the US, there's more than 500 MultiGP chapters So these are local communities of people who say, hey, I want to do drone racing around here. It's nothing crazy. It's just they get together just like any other radio controlled flying club. And, there's a lot of history in the US, not just in drone racing. Drone racing right now is what is popular in, our time, I guess you could say. But there's been lots of other types of RC that have, and communities that have formed out there. As I travel around to these different places, it's really great because the community is all different people, all different walks of life. I'll be sitting next to a guy on the left who's a plumber, next to Susie, who's a school teacher, and so but we all have a shared camaraderie in that we love this FPV thing, but it's also just it's a type of personality where we like to figure things out because there's a lot of things you have to figure out in here. But the friendships that are there, the community that's there, the big event we just finished, which is the International Open, is the biggest FPV event that's there. And we kind of refer to it as it's summer camp. Everybody comes, we all reunite. We have a week together where we just hang out. And so that is one of the things that I think the community that I see from the organizational level is every one of these communities I visit, there's so many new friendships that have been formed around this one bond. And for many of those people, this is the first real community-based group that they've really been a part of. So it's very, very awesome to see that. I'm sure that, Susie has a club, like a group of people that she travels with. And I always look forward to their group coming out here. She can probably tell us some pretty interesting stories of some of their adventures that they've been on together.
We have time.
I will say, I think the community is probably my favorite part. So our best friends now are drone racers, and we would do anything for each other. But even when you go to a race, even though we're all competing against each other, we'll always help another pilot out. So another pilot might need to borrow a battery or some sort of component. He might need help fixing his drone. Everyone is going to be there to pitch in, because although I want to beat the pants off of them, I never want to do it because they have equipment breakdowns. I want to do it because my skill is better than that other pilot. So the community is just, we don't care your age, gender, anything like that. We just want you to come out and have a good time.
So it sounds like it's competitive, but not cutthroat.
Exactly.
Would that be accurate?
Yes.
Okay.
Evan was just thanked at the International Open after beating the other three pilots in the finals. Each one of them took the time to thank Evan for the help that he gave them to help them get to that final, which I thought was really, really awesome.
Yeah, no, I've truly grown up in drone racing. Like since I was, 12, 13 years old, I grew up in this, and that means like I really have built almost like a family out of people out of this community, and it's a relative and it's a very what I would say I couldn't think of a more diverse community, because you have like your rocket scientists for NASA, you have your school teachers, you have your downhill skiers, you have adrenaline junkies, you have nerds, you have like everyone from all parts of life, and they all come together with this incredible passion, because to get into drone racing, there currently is a barrier of entry. Like you have to go through the struggles of learning how to build a drone, the struggles of learning how to fly, the struggles of it not going your way. But once you get past that and you are still there, then you have just, I don't know what it is, but it's just some personality trait, some level of perseverance. And it's so contagious, and we all love that about each other. So it's a community that is, we never give up. We are incredibly passionate. And it is, like I said, I was a annoying little 13-year-old kid flying with guys who were, 20, 30. They had no reason to be nice to me. And they helped me out so much. And anytime I had a problem, they were there to help me out. And anytime I was mad that I didn't win a race, they were there to cheer me back up. And as I've kind of become like a veteran or whatever it is in this industry, as weird as that is to say, like I want to try and be there for those kids that are up and coming, because as Chris said, I'm not going to be in the position I'm in drone racing forever. And a quote that I run a business as well, and that supports a lot of what I do in drone racing. But running a business is very difficult, but they say that you should try and be a boss that is training your employees to someday replace you. As I am where I'm at in drone racing, I want to help these kids out. I say kids in quotes. I mean, they come from 14. Some of them are my age or older, but they're trying to work their way up the industry. And I want to help them through the things that I went through. And I think that would be to some level of leadership then, because when they pass me, and I want them to be that same, willing to help out the younger kids, or willing to help the guy who's having a bad day. And I think that is the face that drone racing needs, and that drones need. You don't want some guy coming up who's not willing to help, who just wants to win, and he might be really good at what he does, but is not willing to help out. I think if we can really promote helping the next generation, promote helping the next group of people who are representing us, because it's not just the people who are out at the races, the top level pilots. That's not who we are worried about representing us. Worried about the people who are getting into it, the people who aren't very educated about drone racing. We want them to have people who are willing to help them, willing to educate them, and willing to guide them through this path. And if I can help promote that in any way, that is one of my, if not my biggest goal in FPV, to help the community outreach, but also just drone racing in general.
I love so much of what you said. Mentorship is really important. And I was also part of a nerdy community once. It was not drone racing. It was swing dancing.
Did you just call us nerds?
No.
Dude, we're total nerds. Like the biggest nerds.
Then yes. So I was a swing dancer for a long time. And I think, Evan, exactly what you're saying, that, as you start at the beginning and you're not really great, and then you experience that kind of mentorship as you get better and gain skills, and then when you're closer to the top, or even somewhere in the middle, right, what you want to do to keep your community going is to help new people as they come into the community. So I love all of that. And I love hearing that about the drone community, and it makes me want to fly. Also, it would be great to, feel like I was in an X-Wing. I think that would be pretty cool. One of my first drones was one of the Star Wars drones, the quadcopters. It was not very well balanced. I crashed a lot.
Crashing is a big part of it.
Yeah, so it seems. There are a couple of points that I want to get to, but Evan, you had brought up, you mentioned diversity, and in my research about drone racing, I don't see a lot of women who are racing, and I guess Ryan and Susie, you're kind of on the spot here, but. And I mean, Chris and Evan, please jump in as well. Like, why do you think that is? And what can we do, or maybe you all, but also, I can get into it. What can we do to make that a little bit more even?
So I personally think there's a few reasons for it. The first, and I think this is sometimes hard for the guys to understand, but I did not want to break my boyfriend's drone. So when you don't know how to solder or make any of these electronic components, you're coming from a base of no knowledge. You don't understand how simple it is to fix an arm or put a new motor on it. Like now I can just laugh about it. But at the time I was really afraid of breaking any of his stuff. So it wasn't until he gave me my own where, hey, if I break my own, I'm not impacting him. That doesn't matter. And I do think that just in grand, very general, I know this is stereotypical, but I didn't grow up knowing how to solder. So that's something I had to learn, and I had to learn the programming and everything that goes into it, where I think maybe boys, maybe in some households, again, yes, I'm really generalizing here, I know that, but they might learn how to do that growing up. And I think the last thing is that sometimes women can feel like if they try it and they're just totally terrible at it, that they cannot be terrible at it. Whereas the guys, they just like think it's funny and they'll just keep going and crashing until they break all their stuff. So I don't know, Ryan, you might have a different perspective or something to add. I'll punt it over to you.
I think you covered it pretty well, but I guess I would echo, and we're similar age, so maybe it's our age and, you know, the year we grew up. But when I was a kid, that, you know, this section in the toy store was divided where, you know, the girl toys were pink and purple. It was, you know, you're taking care of dolls, you're playing with horses, and the boys' toys were more complex, like taking things apart and building. So I, like you, Susan, like didn't have that knowledge base, and that was a huge barrier into finally flying and racing. But I'm a teacher and I teach 9-year-olds. So we're really trying to incorporate STEM into our education. So I've seen a shift. I've seen girls really into robotics, really into using the iPads and the tech and engineering and all those types of things that, you know, weren't really on the table for us when we were growing up. So I've had students come to my races, girls. I bring my drones into school and I let the kids fly the tiny whoops a little bit. I've done maker fairs and math nights and STEM nights just to try to show the kids and the families what drones are all about. And they're not scary and they have so many different applications.
Yeah, I think you both have brought up like a great point that I have found with myself. I don't like making mistakes, right? Like certainly not publicly. And you know, it happens, but if I had it my way, I wouldn't do something until I knew I could do it perfectly. And I don't know if that's just like a weird socialization thing that has happened or what, but I think that's a really valid point. And then I think about, you know, we talked a little bit about this earlier. When I went to college, I studied English literature, right? That's what my degree is in. And I love it. But my my focus was in science fiction. And I was one of the only women in any of those classes. But science fiction is great. And, you know, I've got my dad to blame is maybe not the right word, but to thank for that. And so I guess it seems like it starts super, super young. And Evan and Chris, if you all want to chime in, and, you know, Chris, especially, like, you've got daughters.
Yeah. Well, there's a couple of things that I've seen, and of course, yes, having daughters, like I would say that I'm more sensitive to the subject of you know, the diversity, whether there's going to be men or women involved with my daughters, because I don't want any barriers to stand in their way, right? I don't want them to ever be told that there's something that they can't do. So one of the things, though, that I think is intimidating is that many of these groups are primarily male. So you'd have, you know, maybe 30 guys here flying and one girl shows up, and it's tough because it's uncomfortable. It's weird. And especially when the type of pilots that we deal with, sometimes they're both extremely intelligent, but maybe socially awkward. And so it just makes the whole situation even a little bit more uncomfortable. Now, we are seeing really great strides in our STEM efforts. We've created the STEM Alliance. We work with you know, teachers who want to get this involved, and there it's a very even mix. But the existing community itself, you know, it's changing, but it's changing slowly, and primarily because it's an awkward situation because of the lack of women who are currently in it. But there are plenty of
never like felt awkward in any event. Everyone in the community is just so incredibly supportive. I mean, they don't care. Like I don't know. I guess they notice I'm a girl, but like I've never felt anyone was like, you know, go sit in the corner and bake a pie or something.
I don't know how to talk to
like
you, kind of
like,
thing.
Yeah, I feel like everyone in the community is just so great about it. I've just never personally felt weird or awkward around it. I guess just when the guys are doing maybe like silly stuff with the drones, I'm like, oh, come on. But otherwise, I've never really felt like an outsider or something, I guess.
Yeah, I've always had pilots kind of say, oh, I wish my wife or my girlfriend or whoever would fly, so it's more of an envious thing.
Yeah. Then they have
Well,
to
we
realize they
started-
have to get twice the equipment.
Yeah, that is true. Yeah.
We did start an initiative to try to encourage more women to get into FPV, which Diana and Kalara have headed up. And I'll tell you that the most requested item from our store has been that shirt for the women of MultiGP, because there are a lot of pilots out there who are trying to encourage their wife or a friend to get in and just to just encourage more people into the sport, because it is a lot of fun, and it is something, especially if you're an adrenaline junkie. They talked about the motorcycles and things like that. If you want to take a safer route to that same level of adrenaline, this is it. And we can help a lot of people move into a safer way of getting an adrenaline rush.
That would be cool. I went skydiving once, absolutely loved it. Is this gonna like give me that rush that I'm looking for?
Yes, absolutely. As a skydiver, I'm not a veteran by any means. I think I'm at about 80 jumps, but I can tell you that the intensity of this is very similar.
That's awesome.
And a much lower chance of injury.
Skydiving is pretty safe, generally.
It actually is.
Wow. Well, I learned something new. I
Still
didn't go skydiving.
safer to do FPV.
You would hear if people were falling to their deaths, I think. So okay. Why don't we like take a couple steps back and just like get back into the racing of it, right? Are there different classes, like different levels of racing? I don't know. I've been watching a lot of Formula One recently, thanks to a streaming company with red letters. They've got a great show on there specifically about Formula One, and I think it's really cool. But I wonder, like, is drone racing kind of like that? Do you have different levels, like one where everybody flies the same thing, and you've got like stuff that you have to build yourself? Anyway, I'm going to stop rambling and let you all talk.
Yeah, I would say there's a lot of different ways you can drone race, and lots of different classes in many different ways, I would say. So you have one way you could separate them would be like the size of the drone. So you have tiny whoop racing, like Chris was showing earlier and Susie was talking about. That's a very common way people get into FPV. Very small drones are inexpensive. They don't break very much. And people race them. Pretty much anything that flies, we find a way to race them. That's just kind of our spirit. And then you have a lot like Chris does with MultiGP. Their most common form of racing is what they call open class. And the size of those drones is usually a propeller that's it's a 5-inch diameter, just as he has in his hand there. And that you can put any battery on it. It has to be within a certain size and weigh a certain amount, or it can't weigh too much. So it's, about a size that much. And the drone with battery and everything cooks up to be about 500 or 600 grams. And those drones are incredibly fast. You're building your own. You can run a small motor and a big prop, or a big prop and a small motor. You can run green props, yellow props, with whatever your favorite company. You can do whatever you want. It is truly open class. And that's cool. It really, really pushes innovation. It pushes other people. People are always trying to find the next best combination of motor and propeller, find the next battery, find the next flight controller, or even improve the software side of things. And that's really cool with the innovation that it pushes. Next, you have what I would call spec racing. So spec racing is something that has tried to come into the industry before, but is now kind of coming back into this. And that is where you have to fly maybe the same motor and propeller. That's something that my company does, 533. We have a series called the Freedom Spec Series, where you have to run a certain motor and propeller and a certain battery. And that makes the racing super, super close. And that has made for just kind of a whole new class of racing. And then there's shows like, if you've ever seen drone racing on TV, the DRL, the Drone Racing League, you can watch it on NBC. they are racing all identical drones. So it really comes down to pilot skill. And I find it very, very cool because it's, I would say, probably one of the cheapest forms of racing. So like if you go race cars, you go race go-karts, or you go race pretty much anything, it's going to be expensive. But drones are somewhat inexpensive relative when you're racing at a high level. So our drones are around $350. That is the best drone you can buy. And you can go race that drone at full speed, open class, and then you can buy a different drone that you can spec class, and where you and all your buddies can fly the exact same drone where it's just pilot skill. Or you can, and then when you're done for the day and you go back to one of your buddy's house, you can all race tiny whoops around his house, under his chair, chase his dog. And that is just, there's so many different aspects and classes of FPV that you can stay entertained and have fun all the time, really anywhere as well. Whether that's a big field flying big drones or just in your living room trying to work on having fun and your little skills with a tiny whip.
That's awesome.
Now you also missed 2 classes.
Oh,
right?
We've
got
class.
one. There's the mega class, which if you've ever seen a lawnmower, take the cover off the lawnmower, and it's 4 blades like that. It's gigantic, which Evan just won a pretty good race with these things, but they're huge. And it's scary because of the sound, because the big motors and the big propellers, they're really scary. And then the other one that for whatever reason hasn't really got caught on as much as I would expect it is where they race, instead of a drone with 4 motors, it's a remote control airplane. Wings are the most common, but for whatever reason, those really haven't caught on. But at the end of the day, the real thing that differentiates this kind of racing from any other kind of racing is the fact that you're connected FPV when you're out there and you're doing it. But it's really exciting to see the different levels of innovation. There's just a reason why we still heavily promote the open class. It's terrible because you may be running something today that 2 weeks from now is out of date and no one wants to touch.
Wow.
Just because someone else has figured out a way to make it faster. Inside the community too, you'll find that most of the innovation is being done by people in the community, and they're not necessarily engineers with degrees. Olaf is a great example of one of the pilots.
The snowman?
Similar. He stands out. He's kind of like that character class, I guess you could say.
He's a character. He's a cool dude.
But he started racing and saw a need for a device to turn his video transmitter on and off. So he just designed one. And I think at the time he was 16 years old. So it's
That's
really
incredible.
neat to see that kind of innovation happening inside the industry. Most of the drones that we're flying, the software is weeks old as compared to, the things that you see being used commercially that may be running software that's, a year old, or equipment that's 2 years old. So it's cutting edge.
It sounds like things move really quickly. Like there's a lot of innovation that happens because of necessity, right? Like you're always looking to go faster, to be more agile. How fast do these drones go?
Up to the legal limit. That's the right answer, right?
I mean, I don't think there's a legal limit for how fast they can go. Just how high.
It has to do with the combination of the motor that you're running, the propeller, and then the battery. So you can build a drone for any different setup. Similar to like if you were on a road race, you may put on tires because it's a very tight and technical course, or it may be long straightaways. Mm-hmm. So from an acceleration factor, these drones can go 0 to 60 in under a second. At times they look like they just disappear from existence and then appear over here, which is really, really unbelievable. But from a G-force perspective, I mean, these things will clock in over 30 Gs easily. You would not survive one lap of a course. If your body was somehow able to fit on the drone, you would not be alive at the end of the race.
That's wild. I do want to address, like, there's a question that was in the chat from Double A. After hearing all of these positive things about FPV, how does the FAA feel towards FPV? And so to address that, that's why we're doing this. I am obviously I'm from the FAA. I'm learning about FPV. I'm learning about all of these aspects of drones that I didn't know. And this is not happening in a vacuum. So I want to assure you of that, right? We are taking a lot of notes. We are listening, we are hearing you. And, you know, the FPV community and the racing community sounds really cool. And, you know, this is something that we are going to take up and convey to the other folks at the FAA, that like, this is a really great hobby that is tight knit. It's a great community. It's incredibly innovative and kind to each other. Like all of that, I think are really, really wonderful things. So how does the FAA feel towards FPV? Well, right now, I'm not sure, but I know that I think that it's very cool. And I want to learn more. And so for that, I thank you all four of you for being here today. So let me see. Let me pull up a couple of other questions.
I was going to chime in if
yeah, please go ahead.
I think we talked before about all of the steps that the drone racing community has taken to make sure that our pilots are safe and everything is safe. So we talked about things like we make sure that if the drone loses contact with the radio for whatever reason, that the drone will shut off and you'll simply fall to the ground. And for everyone out there, keep in mind, we're 2 feet off the ground. We don't race above, I don't know, 4 or 6 feet or something like that.
Yeah, so it's not like these drones are falling on anybody's heads or anything like that.
We always recommend people press 2 separate buttons on their radio so that their quad will arm. So we call that a pre-arm switch that helps prevent it from accidentally arming in your hand. We always have a designated landing zone at our races. We don't allow people to fly over the pilots. And every race, we always start with a safety briefing. So I don't know, Chris, if you want to chime in with any other measures, but I think the drone racing community has really been self-policing and saying, hey, we are going to be out here having fun. We're going to fly really fast, but we're going to make sure we do it safe.
Yeah, drone racing is only a small part of a much larger radio control aircraft community that has got an over 100-year history of being one of the safest forms of, definitely one of the safest forms of aviation that's out there, but an extremely safe, very well self-regulated hobby. And just like the rest of the modelers, we're all very concerned with the FAA coming up with any type of rules that could limit our ability to operate our aircraft. We understand that the days of Amazon delivering packages to your house via drones, they're coming. And so obviously we've got to find a way to fly while they're flying at the same time. But there is and Double A is a great friend of mine. He is a volunteer at many of the major races. He, like many of the people in this community, are very worried that the FAA is going to create rules that make sense for Amazon, as an example, but do not make sense for the common pilot to fly. You know, we don't have to file a Form 17-642 in triplicate 6 months before we decide to fly our drone at a park. Nor do we want to carry $1,000 piece of equipment that weighs more than the drone does to send out some sort of radio beacon or pay a ridiculous subscription fee in order to be able to fly. So all forms of this communication with the FAA we like, but I think you'll see the more you talk to the community, and not just FPV, that we are worried that when the FAA starts to enforce their FRIAs or other sorts of ways that they're going to be regulating drones in the airspace, that we are going to have a major issue, and it's going to kill a fledgling sport that right now is probably one of the best STEM education tools that exist.
Yeah, there's a lot there. A couple things. So, if I may, like the FAA, we have a really strong interest in seeing this hobby flourish, right? Like we want FPV, we want racing, we want people to be in aviation, whether that's RC or drones or, however you get there. Part of it is a little self-serving, right? We want people with this kind of passion to come work for the FAA. So part of it is that. The other part of it is that, our mission at the FAA is to make sure that the national airspace system as a whole is safe. So, there's a lot that goes into that system, and we're not picking on any one community. I know that doesn't always feel like that. But it's a lot. And bureaucracy is what it is. Things take some time. And, as Jay said last night, and I don't know if you all watched last night. If you haven't, you should go check it out. But so Jay is the executive director of the UAS integration office. So he's really on the front lines of all of this. Regulations evolve. And that's a point that he brought up yesterday that I want to reiterate today, that like, we want your input, right? We're not making these rules and regulations in a vacuum. There are people who are being affected by it, and we want to hear from you because, and maybe this is just me being me, but like the federal government is here to serve the people, right? So we want to hear from you, and there are ways to do that. We've got the Federal Register, which again, Jay talked about last night. All of the advisory circulars that we put out, they have a comment period. Please go comment. Let us know. Like, we are listening, and we are reading all of those comments. I know that we had the one that just closed for CBOs, which are the community-based organizations. And we are going through those comments. It's going to take us a little bit because, again, government, we're huge, and it takes us some time. But we are going through every single one of the comments, and looking at them and reading them and making changes where we can. So I don't know if that like addresses everything that you wanted, Chris. But we are listening, and you had talked about, sorry, I'm just remembering, you talked about, I think you were referencing remote ID modules. Part of the reason that we left that open and didn't like specify exactly what those are going to look like is because we want the community to do that. We are leaving it open to the market, to the innovators, to come up with something that is like small that you can put on your drone that's not gonna like upset the balance. And I gotta say that the recreational community's input is really like, it's a huge reason why we don't have network ID for when the NPRM, when that came out. We saw all of your comments on that, and we're like, all right, the people don't want it. Let's not do that. So we wanted to make sure that we were addressing that. Sorry, Chris, I totally cut you off, even though as I asked you to talk.
No, you did a great job in trying to answer some of that stuff. I think still, until we see concrete, solid, enforceable rules, like there's a whole FRIA portion to the CBO that makes sense in theory, but until we see how is that applied for, how is that issued, how often is it issued, we operate a little bit differently than a traditional modeling field, for example.
Mhm.
So we have a championship coming up, and we put out for venues for that championship. That venue is not going to be a permanent FRIA, but we're going to be in need of making that a temporary FRIA, if that's going to be the type of approval we're going to get for the airspace use. We just don't want to end up with an unworkable system, because let's say an unworkable system were to happen, which, unfortunately, bureaucracy, right? By the time it's corrected, it'll be too late. I'll have moved on, as will everyone else on this call.
And we don't want that to happen.
We'll have other neat hobbies we'll do, and we'll be fine. But the legacy of the FAA will be having crushed, the remote control community.
I want to assure you that that is not our goal, right? Like we are not stomping over here like, all right, that's it. FPV, we're done. We can't deal with you anymore. Like that, this is not what we want. So yesterday, Jay really encouraged everybody to think in terms of airspace last night. And he is, again, like I said, he is the executive director of our entire office, right? Like as we are talking about drones in the FAA, Jay's the guy. And, having these conversations, I think, is really giving him a lot to think about, right? And helping him approach things a little bit differently. And that's the whole point of having these conversations, right? So that we, the FAA, can learn from you. Like we want to hear from you. And I know like this is a point that I've made a couple of times, but we really do want to hear from you. Like we don't want to do this in a vacuum. We understand that there are people who love this hobby and we don't want to take it away from you, right? We don't want that. All we want is a safe airspace. Like that's our priority. And it seems like you all, Susie, you mentioned earlier that like you all really police kind of yourselves. I think that's great. Evan, you had your hand up. Please go ahead.
I did not mean to put my hand up, but I'm happy to put input. I would say one of the biggest things from my eyes is that we really respect everything the FAA is doing. We really, I truly understand how difficult it must be for what you guys are doing. It's obviously you're balancing two very different things in two very different industries. But I think as far as the hobbyist side, you're not only, I think it's very important to remember that it's not only just the people out in the field flying their drones, racing their drones. And it's not just the people who are flying their remote control airplanes that they built in their basement. It is that this community, is that this group, this drone racing, what it is, that can inspire the next group of female engineers, that can inspire the next group of entrepreneurs, that can inspire, and not only inspire, that can raise that next group and that next generation of those people. And it's something that I believe it's starting to do already. But I think that if we can keep this alive, if we can keep this a good partnership with the FAA and a good partnership with just the community as a whole, the society as a whole, I think that it can raise and truly help innovate the world and raise the next generation of amazing engineers, amazing business owners, and just great people in general that have been grown up and raised through drone racing in that community and learning that problem solving and learning those life skills that drone racing offers. I think that is what's behind drone racing. It is not the race, it's not the competition. It is that next generation of people that can learn from so many of the things that FPV and drones have to offer. We are so excited to work with the FAA and so excited to give our input, give our feedback to you guys and work alongside with you guys to make the airspace safe. And we just are so thankful and appreciative of you guys that you're at least willing to take our input at the very least. And we know you guys have two sides to deal with, but we are very appreciative and thankful that you guys are willing to do that. And we can't wait to see where this goes and hopefully have drones, drone racing, and anything FPV long, keep the airspace safe and make this a very long lasting relationship.
Yes. Thank you so much, Evan. And we are out of time. I'm going to end on that note because that was perfect. I love so much about FPV from hearing from the four of you. So I want to thank all of you, Chris, Evan, Ryan. Oh, that's my 10 p.m. alarm. And Susie, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciated this conversation. We, like I said, have been taking copious notes. And thank you. Thank you for talking to me about your hobby, about this really cool thing that is FPV racing. And I can't wait to watch some races and finally put on some goggles myself. So for everybody who's listening tonight, thank you so much for joining us. And I just want to remind you that Drone Safety Awareness Week is happening all this week. If you go to dronesafetyawarenessweek.com, we've got events every day this week, including the weekend, when please go outside, take your drones, take your RC aircraft, go fly. And thank you so much for all being here. One last thing, Chris, you want to talk a little bit about the race that's happening on Thursday?
Absolutely. We're going to be using a course that was used for the TBS Euro Spec. I think it was the 7th season, if I'm not mistaken. Great course. It'll be fun to tune in if you have never seen a drone race. This will be virtual, but still, it's a great way for you to get a feel for what it looks like in a drone race. And if it's something you're looking to get started into, it's a great entry point.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And again, for those of you who don't know, tomorrow we're going to be talking to a couple of panelists who fly RC. And then Thursday, we've got our simulated drone race with MultiGP. So thank you again for tuning in tonight and have a great night.
Thanks for having us. Take care.